This talk is on front-end testing tools. So it'll be just a review of some of the tools that you can use to test different aspects of the front end of your website. This is talk I'm gearing towards anybody who's interested in the quality of a website from the front end. So I'm not going to dive into code. It's going to be a coverage of tools that you could use, whether you're a developer or a designer or a project manager, somebody in QA, really anybody who has an interest or in some way of tracking and improving quality. So my name is Julia Koelsch. I am a founding partner and CTO of Spry Digital. We're an agency here in St. Louis. We've been working with Drupal since Drupal 6. So we started, and we also work with WordPress and other custom PHP or JavaScript development. So the tools I'm going to talk about today are tools that we've found over time. So as you can imagine, the world of testing tools has evolved a lot since we started 7 years ago, and we've tried out a lot of tools, and some have worked out and some haven't. So this is kind of a review of where we are with tools that we use for various websites. So let's go ahead and get going. So I just want to establish the goals for today's talk, and it's just about helping you better understand the aspects of front-end testing, coming away with some ideas for improving your own processes, and please feel free to ask lots of questions along the way. Okay, so let's first talk about responsive testing. So most websites that are built today, not all, but many, are responsive in nature, meaning that it works well across a variety of screen sizes and devices. Testing responsive behavior can be a little tedious, and it's easy to overlook. So there are a couple tools that we find pretty helpful for testing responsive behavior. Two I'll talk about are, one is a Chrome extension. So a lot of times it's helpful to have the tools built into your browser. So I'll focus on Chrome. That's not to say that aren't similar tools for Internet Explorer or Edge or Firefox or whatever you're using, but I happen to use Chrome, so focus on some of those tools. One really helpful tool for a variety of reasons to look at responsive behavior is this Emmet Review extension in Chrome. And my slides will be available with links to all of these tools after the talk. So this is where you would go and get the plugin. And let me give you a little demo of what it looks like. So I created a little demo site for us, just to walk through some of the tools, and I have it installed in my Chrome. So I just click it where it lives, and it does a couple of things like out of the box. So it will give you a different view of your website in different breakpoint views. So we start at super narrow, and we grow increasingly wider. And what's nice is you can scroll through one viewport, and it'll show you in comparison how it's doing at that same point in the page across the different viewports. And then alternately, you can also change it to a device wall. So sometimes you'll have a variety of different actual tools to test with, but this kind of gives you a virtual version of that. So I could choose a set of Apple phones, I could choose a set of Android phones, and it's going to reconfigure and reposition things. So again, you can interact with the pages. So you can click on menus and see how it works, even when you're logged in and looking at the back end. And for the most part, it responds in all of them when you click on one. But menus seem to be a little tricky. So, and then you can set up your own specific presets. So, if you're focusing on particular devices or viewports, you can go ahead and set those up and keep an eye on things. So that's not to say that you have to use an extension. Chrome has developer tools built into it that are also really helpful. So I'm going to try to break out of Emmet. I just go back to my site. And you can pull up developer tools by you just go and inspect something and your developer tools pop up, or you can get to it from the menu. But if you go up here, and it's a little hard to see, but you can toggle device toolbar, and that'll give you a view of your site in various types of devices. So you toggle, untoggle, like so. And again, you can still interact with it. Here's where you can change what type of device, so you can just say responsive, or if you want a particular device to look at, and you can rotate also. See how it rotates back and forth. All right. So the next aspect that's helpful to continually monitor while you're developing a website is cross-browser testing. So, we're in a pretty good spot today. A lot of the current browsers do really good support for current standards like HTML standards, CSS standards, JavaScript standards. That's not to say everything is exactly the same. And also there are often times where for one reason or another you need to support older browsers. So having a tool at your disposal while especially during development, is really helpful in keeping tabs on how your site is looking and responding in different browsers. So the tool we use for that mainly is something called Browser Stack. There's another one called Sauce Labs, but I'll give you a demo of how Browser Stack works. So, again, come back here, and I'm already logged into our Browser Stack account, so when I click on Browser Stack, and it automatically pops up and shows me all of the testing options available to me. So Browser Stack gives you actual virtual environments, so it's as close as possible to testing on devices without actually having it in your hands. Now, if you're a developer, these types of tools also have great APIs, so you can integrate testing from Browser Stack into your test suites and things like that. But I'll just focus on doing it through the UI. So as you can see, you can pick like either a desktop, and you can pick an operating system, and then drill down into, once you have the operating system showing you can pick various browsers. You can also pick a device. So we'll go ahead and show the Galaxy. And then once you have that, you can pick the browser that you see once you're in there. It'll take a couple seconds for the virtual environment to actually spin up. And then you can interact with it like a device. So you can click in the address bar and start typing in there. You can click on things, scroll through, and it's going to be a little slower, obviously, than working with a physical device, but it gives you a really good idea of what your site's going to look like and behave, how it will behave in those devices. And then on top of that, you have some extra tools, so it'll help you inspect the HTML and some other developer tools that help you drill into, especially when you find issues. So that's one part that can be even better than having a physical device, because you don't always have developer tools available to you when you're looking at it on your phone. All right. So let's talk about website performance. This is another aspect of website development, and especially post-launch, where you want to keep an eye on how your website is performing. So, I think in general, it's you want to think about your user and your user experience, and having a website that takes several seconds to load is going to turn people off, and they'll go, find another site to look at. On top of that, your performance impacts SEO. So, helping your site be found in search engines is important. So focusing on performance is important. And also, when you're working on your site itself, the slower it loads, the more you have to wait to, do your work as you're working. So it's also in your own interest. So There are a lot of tools you can use to monitor website performance. I won't go through all of them. I'll just focus on a few that we use. And the things you want to think about are, when are you testing? So when you're working on your website, you want to be testing as you go along. So you want a tool that's available to you that you can do a quick test, as you hit milestones in development. Also, on the other hand, it's also really helpful to have a tool that's running all the time. So, even during development, but especially after you launch your site, and you have users adding content, having an idea of how your website's performance is changing over time is really helpful, because if you don't keep an eye on it, you may hand off a site that is snappy and speedy, and then a couple of large images later, the site is loading really slowly and people are frustrated. And if you don't have a test that's running, you may never know that until somebody complains. And it's a lot better to address issues before somebody else notices them. So let's first talk about real-time testing tools. There's a couple. We'll start with a third-party service. So the one that I've been using for a long time is called Web Page Test. It is super thorough. You can learn so much about this, and you probably have a whole presentation just on Web Page Test alone. What this does is it's a service where you can put in the URL of your website, and you have a variety of options to choose from. You can choose where you want to test your site from. So that can impact the performance of your site depending on where the user is in relation to where the site's being hosted. You can choose the browser. The browser may vary based on the location you choose. So if you see, like, this Dulles, Virginia option has Chrome, Firefox, Edge, IE 11, whereas some others just have Chrome and Firefox. And then there are some advanced options where you can choose the type of connection. So, when you're developing sites, you're probably working in an environment with fast, reliable internet connections, but your users may not have that. So it's important to know how it's going to work for people who may not have, a dedicated super Wi-Fi environment. They might be on LTE for instance, and it's good to know what it looks like for them. You can choose how many tests to run. So you may find that due to how your website is hosted, it might be slow the first time, and then it might pick up because the things are cached and both in the browser and on the server. So it's helpful to know what it looks like the first time through and then on the repeat view. This tool can capture video. And you can also indicate whether you want to keep your test private, or you can also, there's a place in here where you can see all of the other tests that people are running. So that's always an interesting case. And then when you're ready, you just click Start Test. So because it's a free tool, you will often end up in a queue. Depending on the time of day, you might be the first one in line, or you might be the fifth one in line. So, I didn't even enter our test site URL, so it won't run anything. So I'm in the front of the queue, but that's okay because I already did this earlier, so we can see what it looks like. So it's going to give you a lot of information, and you might feel overwhelmed if this is the first time you've seen a tool like this, but there's a couple of key pieces to focus on. Obviously, they give you a grade at the very top, which feels very satisfying, or scary, depending on the grade you receive. But it really just means that it's looking at a few key aspects of performance. So it's looking at the first time byte. And what that means is that how long does it take from the time you request that page to the time your browser gets the first piece of information back to the server. So if that's slow, that can indicate a couple of things. It might be that your server is running slowly and you need to focus on things on that end of things. Could also mean your network is slow, so if the or there might be a communication issue. So there's a lot of aspects to that, but that's a good thing to focus on and continually test. It's looking at an option called Keep Alive Enabled. That's a server option, so that helps improve performance. Whether or not the information that's being sent is compressed, that's also a server configuration. It's looking at whether images are compressed. So images on most sites take up a significant portion of all the information that's sent back to the browser. So looking at whether or not you're handling images correctly and compressing them as much as possible is important in your score. It's looking at whether you have cached static content. So for larger websites, there's something called a content delivery network, and that just means is that it takes the parts of your site that aren't dynamic and putting them on servers all over the world. So that means it can just get to your users more quickly. So for smaller sites, you probably don't need to worry about that, although the ability to do this is easier than ever. So anyway, once you get into the summary, the things to look for are your load times. So and this will break it out into the first view versus the repeat view. So as you can see, although our site is super fast right now because we haven't done much to it other than a default Drupal site, you can see that the repeat view is just a little faster. We have half a second versus less than. And that is the overall load time. So you can see that that consists of first byte plus when it starts to render. So it's gotten the data, it's starting to get the data, and it's starting to render the page. And then this tool gives you a speed index, so just giving you an overall score. So those numbers may not mean a whole bunch to you out of the box, but what you should be looking for are trends. So this tool is most useful if you're using it consistently. So using it during development, using it after development, you're continuing to run tests, and you're looking at how those numbers are changing. You want numbers to be improving, and when you see them getting bigger and things are getting slower, then you want to drill down into what's going on. And this tool also allows you to see a lot of information about what's causing your page to be slow or fast. So it gives you some screenshots, and then it gives you some waterfall views. So I'll show those in a second. We ran this test 3 times, so we see 3 versions of that. So if you drill down into the detail view, you can go a little deeper and show of all of the things that make up the page to show a complete page, how long did each part of that take? So it will look at the first time to byte, and then it'll also look at images. So how long did particular images take to load? So the larger the image, the larger the file size, the longer it will take to download, which impacts the speed of your site. And then you can keep going, and it gives you request details. So each website consists of not only the HTML, but all of the CSS files and the JavaScript files that are included in that page, and all of the images. So each one of those is requested separately, so you can see in this view statistics about that. So you drill down also into other tabs. So you're going to go deeper and deeper into the details of this. Again, looking at trends, and when you see a trend, something trending down or slower, start drilling into the performance review. This will give you very detailed information about each image and things like that. Gives you screenshots so you can verify to see that this test is actually seeing the same thing that you see. And this also is one helpful reminder is that this is testing the one page that you put in. So this is not testing your entire site. So I put in the home page of my demo site. It's just testing that page. So often the home page is a good test because it will give you an indication of how your website's doing overall, but your homepage is often heavier than most other pages. You'll probably have more images, you may have more dynamic content, So it's a good start, but you should also keep an eye on any particular pages that might have a lot of images. If you have a rotator, or if you have something with a lot of dynamic behavior, that is something that's not just a wall of text. Those are places where you want to keep an eye on how your website's doing. Tools like this, again, have ways of hooking into test automation suites. There's a plugin for Jenkins for web page tests, I believe. So, if developers out there, these are things that you can do on an automated way to help you keep an eye on things and send out alerts when things fall below a certain threshold. So, another tool for looking at performance is also within your Chrome developer tools. There's a couple of tools that are helpful. One is if you go under the Performance tab, you can click and record, and it will start recording everything that's going on in the browser while the recording is happening. So you can reload and then stop, and it will give you a breakdown of what was going on during that time span. So, the time I clicked begin recording, and it took me a second or two to get up to refresh the page. So, but it's focusing on the parts that it took for page render. And again, it's going to give you a similar view. So like the waterfall view where you see the different parts of your site and what parts took longer than others. And then down below, you get a summary of things like what part of the overall page took longer. So for this page, scripting took a while, whereas loading didn't take very much time at all. You can look from a bottom-up point of view, so it gives you total load time for various activities that the browser does when it's rendering a page. And as you can see, it's a lot. So it's a lot of information, but again, focusing on trends and focusing on something that looks a lot bigger than others or relative to where it should be is what will help you zone in on figuring out your performance issues. And then, like I was saying, it's really helpful if you have something automated that runs a test and can send out reports or give you alerts when things aren't performing up to standards. And like all of these tools, there's a million services that offer something like this. We've been using a tool lately called GT Metrics. It has a free option, but then there's also paid versions. So if you have a lot of sites to monitor, if you want to do something special, it will give you that option too for some money every month. But this gives you, what's nice about GT Metrics is it will give you scores based on how Google sees the performance of your site, which factors into SEO. YSlow is another tool to measure performance. And then again, it will give you the waterfall view, it will give you timing, so how much time it took for different aspects of the page render. It takes a video of your page to you can see what it looks like as it's loading. And then I haven't run a history of this, but like I said, what you do is you set this test up and you indicate you want to run it every day, or if it's a really important high traffic site, you might want to run it more frequently, and it'll give you a historical view of your scores and performance over time. So, like I said, page view is how Google grades your site. So it grades it on a lot of things, not just speed, but also relative performance. So are you doing the right things to make your site as fast as possible? So not just absolute speed, but also doing best practices. So, and it will give you information about if you're not at a grade score. It'll give you information about why it's graded you the way it has. So for instance, this browser caching, I could be leveraging browser caching better. That would allow the browser to cache particular images that are on this website that it's being tested. And it tells me what those images are. So I can do different things either from the Drupal site point of view or on the server point of view to make sure that those images are cached better. And if you're not sure what that even means, it has a lot of helpful information. So it'll explain what it means about that. And there's a lot of knowledge base articles where you can dive into every aspect of where you need to improve. So optimizing images. Obviously, there's a lot about images because that really, more than anything, can really make a fast site slow. Like a couple of big images can significantly slow down a site.
Julie, did you say
Yeah.
this is the paid version?
You're seeing the free version. So yeah, I think you can monitor up to 3 domains for free, like on a nightly basis. And then the paid version just allows you to have more or have more frequent tests and things like that. And I've mentioned this a little bit, but when you're developing a site, it's really helpful if you think about what a lot of people are calling a performance budget. So think about what is an acceptable load time for your pages, and if you define that ahead of time, when you start edging towards that on particular pages, you can have conversations during development about, is this the best way of developing the page? Are there other scripts we can use that might make it faster? Are there, maybe we want to think about how the page is designed and come up with something that although achieves the goals for that page, might be implemented in a different way that can make your site still perform quickly. So the performance budget and deciding where you want your page load time to be and other aspects is helpful to define ahead of time so you can have those conversations. It helps prompt that conversation, and you don't save it till the end when you're trying to launch your site and you're like, well, this rotator is too slow, and that conversation should have happened weeks ago. But if you do have a website where you are trying to improve the performance, it is critical if you use these tools, but you start measure your baseline. So measure exactly where you are, and then document all of the little steps you're taking to improve your performance, and then retest and log those results as you go, because there's so many aspects, and there's so, especially the first few times you do this, there's so many different ways, and you're not sure what is going to have the best impact. This will help you understand where you are in terms of improving from a relative position of where you started. So documenting and logging is really, I would really recommend it.
And do you document and log up external to the site, or does that handle it?
Yeah, we've used anywhere from just creating a spreadsheet. So we start with the basic stats of what web page test or something else shows us, or with a tool like that GT Metrics, it stores historical data for you. So if you wanted to just rely on that, the only thing I would caution is if you rely on a third party alone, it would be helpful if you could annotate in some way. And I don't know if that tool allows you to, but like if you improved 5%, what did you do to improve that? Did you, make changes on the server? Did you compress images? That kind of thing.
How often do you test something like that? Is it a daily thing, a weekly thing? Does it just depend on the project?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the project. So we're trying to get all of so we host and maintain a lot of sites. And we're trying to get it set up so it's running a nightly score for those sites. What helps that What's helpful for us in that is that, you know, we can see how the site's performing over time as content's being modified. It also helps us understand, so we, you know, when we do maintenance, when we do Drupal maintenance and we apply an update to a module, you know, it doesn't happen often, but sometimes that can impact the look or the performance of your site. So having a test that you can, you know, quickly run after you've done it, or it automates and, you know, gives you alerts if you forget to run it, is really helpful. All right. Let's talk about user acceptance testing. So a lot of tools I've been talking about are helpful when you're developing your site, helpful after you've developed your site. This covers, you know, when you're getting ready to show your site to the people, your users that you're developing the site for. So whether that's internal users, you know, the rest of the internal team, people at your company, or if you're developing for a client, it's helpful to have tools to facilitate that testing process. So the one we have been relying on for quite a while now is something called BugHerd. BugHerd is a pretty cool tool, and I will show you why. So BugHerd installs a little overlay on a site that you set it up for. And what it allows you to do is, as you're going through the site, you can mark on the site itself things that you want to make a note of for the development team. So whether that is you're indicating there's a typo, or you see a bug, you can pinpoint exactly where you're seeing that. And it'll take a screenshot. It will make a note of what browser and operating system the user is using in order to see that site, the issue, because, you know, that goes back to cross-browser testing. And it also gives you a Kanban style board, so you can assign the bug, like evaluate the bugs, assign them, and move them through the process so you can understand the history of the bug, who's worked on it, things like that. So I'll give you a quick demo of that. So BugHerd has a Chrome extension. So if you're using Chrome itself, you can automatically get the BugHerd overlay right in your browser. If you want to use it on other browsers, you can, but you just have to install a little JavaScript into your site to allow the same functionality to work. So as you can see, there's this little box in the lower right, and if I click that, it's going to give me a toolbar. And this is going to allow me to create new bugs. So I click the plus sign, and it's going to allow me to pinpoint a large level or a small, narrow scope what I would like to indicate. So if I click on the title, I can write, this is wrong title. Oops. I can assign it to somebody or leave it unassigned if I don't know. I can set the severity. This is a really critical issue. I can tag it. So, you know, for if you aren't going to have very many bugs, you may not need to categorize it. But if you're using BugHerd to test over a period of time, testing a lot of different aspects of your site, it's helpful to categorize your bugs. But if you just do that minimum, and you click Create Test, you can see I now have this little pin to indicate that I've pinned this issue. So that's helpful because A, you know it's done, but B, somebody else going onto the site using BugHerd will know, oh, that issue's already been flagged. I don't have to worry about it. Somebody else has already reported it. Or I am assigned to it. I see, oh, there's the bug right away. I can go drill in and work on it. So I can click on it, and it'll pop up an expanded toolbar to show me what the description. I can change the status of it. So right now, by default, it's in backlog, and I'll show you that board in just a second. I can view the screenshot, so it'll show me this is exactly what the screen looked like when that person clicked the pin to create the pin. I can change the severity. I can see who reported it. You can attach files. You can add comments, and you can toggle that to see the history of that particular pin. So I'm going to drill into the Kanban board now. So this is what the development team would work from. So like I said, by default, you have the pins that are created automatically fall into the backlog category. So when I click on the pin, I get this same view on the right side, and I can evaluate at that point. So, just because somebody pinned it doesn't mean it's something we really we necessarily need to work on. So you could close it at this point, or you can say, no, I really think this needs to be worked on, so I'll mark it as to do, and it falls into the next category. And again, you keep moving it through the statuses. When you're ready to work on it, you can either change it from now, you can just drag it over and say, okay, I'm working on it, I'll go ahead and assign it to me. And then when I'm done, I'll move it to done. And that means it doesn't fall off the radar. It just means that it is ready for somebody to verify, ideally the person who pinned it, to verify that the issue is resolved. Because you might think it's done, but that doesn't really mean it's done. So again, this is a really helpful tool to communicate not only issues and bugs, but have conversations about what the front end of your website is looking like and is working. So it helps eliminate confusion about, oh, I'm at this page, and when you thought I was talking about this other page, or I didn't understand what browser you were using, or things like that. It's really been a fantastic tool for us.
And how do you integrate that with your regular sort of task management?
Well, that's an interesting point. So Bugherd has some integrations with other tools. You have to think about that, though. So we had it integrated into our task management system for a while, especially when we first started using Bugherd. And depending on the volume of bugs, it can be completely overwhelming. So right now we have just general tasks right now when ready for this phase of testing to work on Bugherd tasks. So and you get email notifications and things like that when you're assigned bugs, or if you're involved in a bug in some way. So there's ways of keeping tabs on it, but yeah. Okay, so the last thing I will demonstrate is something called to help with regression testing. So this is really especially helpful after the fact. After we launch the site, and we want to see how the website is doing over time. So this is helpful to keep an eye on a daily basis, but also especially important when we're doing maintenance on a site. So when we're updating a Drupal core or any modules, it's entirely in the realm of possibility that update might change how the site looks or works. And if you're not careful and you overlook looking at a particular page, you'll completely miss that, but somebody else will notice it sooner or later. So again, there are a lot of tools that help with this. There are a lot of developer level tools that you can use to write tests. One we found that helps non-developers set up and create these tests is called Ghost Inspector. Oops. Let's go look at that. So what Ghost Inspector does is it is a third-party service, and it has an extension, and it allows you to record a test. So in the Ghost Inspector extension, you go and you visit your website. You click record. You're going to start recording. It'll start recording all of the things that you do on your site. Every click you take, every page that's rendered based on that, or change that's rendered based on that click. And then when you're done going through the site, or at least the parts that you want to test, you click end recording, and it has stored the exact steps that you've taken. It stores it at a code level, so it'll store the fact that you clicked on a menu link as you clicked on the third item in the third menu, and from the HTML code point of view. So it's helpful to understand, because menus and things like that can change, especially if you don't control the content entry, if there are other people who are managing that part, that can change. But it could also change based on non-user intervention, so it's helpful to understand when those changes happen. So I'll give you a quick view of a test and how that works. So I'm going to close out of Bug Herd, and I have a little ghost icon. It's going to ask, do I want to create a new test? Sure. So now it's recording, and as I go through, and I'm going to click links in the main menu. All right, and then I'm going to click done. And finish recording. You can organize your tests. So if you have a lot of sites that you want to record tests for, you can organize them into suites. And you can create rules for when you want these to run, how you want issues to be notified, how do you want notifications to be sent, if you want it to be popped up into Slack, if you want emails, that kind of thing. You can set that at an individual test level or at a suite level. So immediately I can go and view the test. When I view it for the first time, it's just going to rerun the test. And so it's going through the exact same steps on the exact same site that I just went through. So it can take a few seconds depending on how many steps that you recorded. So it just finished. And what this does is it gives you a pass or fail based on whether or not it can complete the same steps that you took. So if I went and changed the menu and I removed a link that I clicked on, my test would fail and I'd get notified that my test failed. In addition to that, you can watch the video of the screen as the test is being run. And then another really helpful tool is that it will do screenshot comparisons. So let's say that your page changed for whatever reason, and that could be on purpose because you modified the content of that page, or it could be on accident because somebody accidentally updated a view and didn't understand that it would impact some other page and cause something to break. So it's for better or worse, but you know exactly what's going on your site, and you can see from a screenshot comparison what has changed on your site.
But you have to visually check yourself.
So you can get alerts. So if you set it to run daily, for instance, when it runs, you can set whether you want just errors to be, get notifications of, or just like status. And in that notification, you'll see what failed. Was it that the step couldn't complete, or did the screenshot fail? You can set parameters for screenshot comparisons and other things like that, so that you can say, I want 25% leniency on screenshot comparisons. So what that means is that you could change parts of the page. You might change a little bit of content, but that's not it, and it will say, well, the change indicated that there was like a 12% difference between the pages, and that test would still pass. So that allows you to not have to worry about every content change, but only worry about when something significant changes on your site. And I will try to do one of those quickly. Let's see. Maybe we can see it real fast. I can't remember if I clicked on third or not. Let's see. Ghost Inspector keeps a history of the tests you run over time, so you can see when it was run, who triggered it, and the history of the pass-fail status. You can drill into the details of that, if it failed, the details of the failure. For people who are more familiar with code, you can edit the steps. So it's identifying behavior and actions based on the HTML code, the DOM. So you can modify it at the test level. So you can do more advanced testing scripts. You can also do things like give Ghost Inspector a spreadsheet that contains form values so that it will automatically populate a form with the values in that spreadsheet every time it hits a form and submits it. That's really helpful not only for verifying that your forms still work, but if you're working on developing a complex form and you have to fill that form out 50 times to make sure it works, use Ghost Inspector, run it, and then you don't have to keep entering, your Homer Simpson credentials every time you fill the form out to make sure that your validation is working and things like that. But I can show you later. If you want to see more about Ghost Inspector, I'm happy to talk about it afterwards, but I need to wrap up, so let's get back to the slides. Okay, so I just barely scratched the surface. I talked mainly about front-end testing, and I talked mainly about tools that you can use even if you don't have access to the code or you know much about development. That's not to say that that's all of the testing you should do. There's a huge variety of ways you can test your website. I didn't talk about accessibility testing, and part of the reason is we're having a great talk soon by Kevin talking about accessibility. So you can go and dive deep into that after lunch. You can talk about back-end performance, so looking at your server, looking at your PHP level type of performance. So that's something, there's a whole variety of tools that allow you to improve your performance and measure performance on that level. You can talk about requirements testing or behavior testing. So something like BHAT, which allows you to talk about whether or not your site is doing the right thing, is a really great tool to dive into if you want to focus on tools that allow you to document and automate testing at that level. You have code level tests, so unit tests and things like that. You have security testing. You have PCI compliance testing. There might be other security audits that you probably want to be performing on your site by people who understand something about security. There are other testing aspects that I haven't even talked about, or I might not even know about. So I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I want you to feel like you have some tools that allow you to make improvements to your process. So, a tool is only as good as your process that incorporates those tools. Using a tool once might give you some insight, but the real value comes from incorporating it and having your whole team use these tools together to understand what's going on and to make improvements. And then, it's great that we have so many ways of automating things, but understand where the effort to automate things makes the most sense. Just because you can doesn't mean you necessarily should. So, and especially if that means that it increases the hurdle to actually using a tool. Start with easy tasks, see if you can automate it, and then move on to the next step. So that is about all the time I have. So I apologize, I didn't leave a lot of time for questions. If you want to hit me up after I'm here all day, I'll be at happy hour. I'm happy to talk more because I love testing. All right, thank you very much.